In a forgotten village, when the sun sets, the shadows vanish, and with them, so do the people. They whisper about him, the man with the lantern. Once you see his light, you can never escape the darkness. The village of Black Hollow sat hidden deep within a valley where the mountains pressed close, as if trying to keep the world outside from entering. The villagers lived simple lives, farming, fishing, raising children, but they carried with them a strange silence, a silence thick enough to unsettle any outsider. It was not the usual quiet of rural life. It was the kind of silence where conversations were cut short when the sun began to set, where no laughter rose after nightfall, and where shutters slammed shut the moment dusk crept across the cobbled streets. One thing was immediately noticeable to anyone who visited Black Hollow: there were no shadows after dark. The moment the last light of the sun dipped behind the mountains, the night swallowed everything. Torches, lanterns, even the moon itself failed to cast shadows. People walked under the stars as if they were paper cutouts, flat and soulless. Travelers often asked why, but the villagers gave no answer. They only warned, stay inside. Don't walk the streets when the lantern light appears. But one night, a wandering schoolteacher named Elias, curious and stubborn, ignored their warning. He wanted to understand why the children whispered of the lantern man, a figure said to appear on the road carrying an old oil lamp that glowed with an unnatural flame. As the village fell asleep and the sky turned black, Elias crept from his rented room. His footsteps made no echo, his body no shadow. He moved through a world drained of shape, holding only a single candle to guide him, and then he saw it. Far down the empty street, between the leaning houses, a light flickered. Not the warm gold of fire, but a pale, greenish glow that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. It swayed back and forth, as if carried by an unseen hand. The candle in Elias's grip hissed and sputtered. The flame bent away from the strange glow as though afraid. And then, a whisper drifted across the dark street, carried on no wind. Once you see the lantern, it already sees you. Elias froze, his breath caught in his throat, and the light began to move closer. The door ground shut behind Ethan with the weight of a coffin lid, sealing out the last whisper of the outside world. The air inside was colder, as if the house itself had been waiting for him, keeping its lungs empty until the moment it could breathe him in. He stood in the entryway, flashlight trembling slightly in his grip, the narrow cone of light cutting through swirling dust that glittered like ash in the beam. The place smelled of mildew, rot, and something metallic like rust or old blood. For a moment, there was only silence. Then he heard it, the echo. It wasn't the natural echo of his own movements, but something warped. His footsteps didn't come back to him the way sound should. Instead, they returned stretched, drawn out, distorted, like a voice calling from the bottom of a well. Each creak of the floorboard beneath him replayed itself with a delay, as though something deep within the house wanted to mimic his every move, but imperfectly. Just the acoustics, he muttered under his breath. His own voice didn't sound like his own when it bounced back to him. It was higher, thinner, whispering from far down the hallway ahead. The beam of his flashlight slid over the peeling wallpaper, once floral, now blackened with mold. Family portraits lined the walls. He leaned closer to one, brushing away the grime, and nearly recoiled. The faces had been scratched out, every set of eyes gouged with deep, angry cuts. Only the mouths remained visible, twisted in expressions he couldn't quite read. Were they smiling or screaming? Ethan shook his head, forcing himself forward. The hall seemed longer than it should have been. He remembered from the outside that the house couldn't possibly stretch so far back, but here, the corridor unspooled endlessly into shadow. His footsteps quickened without him meaning to. The echoes followed, lagging behind, slower, heavier, as though something larger than him was trailing close at his back. He spun around, flashlight cutting through the dark, empty. The entryway he'd come through was nowhere to be seen. The hallway had sealed itself, extending in both directions. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple despite the chill. "Keep moving," he whispered. Ahead, a door stood ajar. A sliver of pale light spilled through it, flickering like candlelight, though he knew he hadn't seen any electricity running to the house. He pushed the door open, its hinges screaming like an animal in pain. The room beyond was a dining hall. A long table stretched out, covered in a moth-eaten cloth. Plates still in place as though waiting for a family meal that had never come. Silverware gleamed faintly in the dying glow of his flashlight, but it was the chairs that stopped him cold. Each chair was pulled back, as though the family had risen suddenly, all at once. The impressions of their bodies still dented the faded cushions, yet no one sat there. The air above them seemed disturbed, almost vibrating, like heat haze on a summer road. Then he heard it again, the echo. Only this time it wasn't his. A laugh. Soft, childlike, rippling down the length of the table. It bounced along the walls, splitting, repeating, until it sounded like dozens of children laughing together, filling the air with a sound both innocent and deeply wrong. Ethan froze, his throat dry. "Hello?" The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed pressed against his ears, thick and suffocating. He felt the temperature drop further. The condensation of his breath swirled in the beam of his flashlight. Then, one by one, the silver forks on the table began to shift. Slowly at first, then rattling, scraping against the plates as though invisible hands gripped them. With a crash, all the silverware flung into the air and clattered against the walls. Ethan ducked, his flashlight slipping from his grasp and rolling across the floor. The hall went black. Scrambling on hands and knees, he felt the cold wood beneath his palms. His fingers brushed the flashlight, but before he could grab it, another hand closed over his. Small, ice cold. He yanked back violently, grabbing the flashlight and swinging the beam around. Nothing. The dining hall was empty, the table bare, the chairs neatly tucked in. The echoes had stopped. Ethan's pulse hammered. He staggered back into the hallway, slamming the door shut behind him. His breath came ragged, his knuckles white around the flashlight. The corridor stretched on, darker than before. The wallpaper seemed to ripple, bulging slightly as though something pressed from the other side of the wall, desperate to get through. And then, he realized it. The echoes weren't random. They were leading him. Every sound he made came back to him in a distorted pattern, almost musical, like breadcrumbs left in audio form. His footsteps echoed not where they should have, but ahead, luring him deeper, urging him to follow. At first, he resisted, backing away, but the moment he did, the house rebelled. The floor beneath him groaned, splitting slightly, as if the wood would collapse. A low rumble shivered through the walls, shaking dust from the ceiling. It wanted him to move forward. With no other choice, Ethan followed the sound. His heart thudded, every step sinking him deeper into something he couldn't escape. After what felt like hours, he reached a staircase. The echoes stopped. Complete silence. The stairs spiraled upward into darkness. At the base of the steps was a mirror, cracked across its surface, leaning against the wall. Ethan raised his flashlight and caught his own reflection, only it wasn't right. The figure in the mirror lagged half a second behind his movements. When he lifted his arm, the reflection hesitated before copying. And the face smiled. Ethan staggered back, nearly tripping over the first stair. The reflection leaned closer to the glass, its smile widening until the cracks splintered further, spreading like veins across the surface. A faint scratching noise came from behind the glass, as if fingernails dragged across it. The cracks bled. A droplet of red ran down the mirror, pattering onto the floor. Ethan bolted up the staircase, taking the steps two at a time. The beam of his flashlight jittered across the walls, revealing more portraits. More faceless figures gouged out, their mouths stretching wider now, smiling grotesquely as he passed. At the top of the stairs, the hallway branched into multiple doors. Every door was closed, but as he approached, the echoes returned. A knock. From behind the first door, 3 knocks, then silence. From the second door, a long, dragging moan. From the third, a whisper, so faint, he pressed his ear against the wood to hear it. "We've been waiting." His blood froze. He backed away slowly, heart hammering. Every door began to rattle, shaking violently, as though something behind each one wanted out. The handles twisted, pounded, strained. Then, all at once, silence again. One door, at the very end of the hall, creaked open by itself. Inside, only darkness. And in the distance, far deeper within the house, a voice echoed, not distorted, not delayed. A woman's voice, calm, gentle. "Come upstairs, Ethan. We're all here." The sound wasn't bouncing anymore. It wasn't an echo. It was real. The stone steps were narrower here, each one slick with moisture. Ethan's hand dragged along the cold wall for balance as he moved, his flashlight beam jittering with each unsteady breath. The child's voice still echoed in his skull. "Don't let them put me back in the walls." He couldn't shake it. Who was the child? What did they mean, back in the walls? The steps ended abruptly, spilling him into a small chamber that smelled of rust and stagnant water. The walls curved, old brick bowing inward under the weight of years. Puddles rippled where droplets fell from above, though Ethan couldn't see from where, and then he saw it. A clock. It stood in the center of the room. A tall grandfather clock, wooden and ornate, its surface cracked and scarred with time. Dust shrouded its face, but through the glass he could see the hand stop dead at 12. The pendulum hung motionless, but he swore he could hear it. A slow, steady tick-tick echoing through the chamber, even though the clock itself did not move. His flashlight flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. The voice returned, not the child this time. A deeper, rasping murmur from nowhere and everywhere. "It doesn't move. Until you do." Ethan spun, the beam slicing through empty corners. Nothing, no one, just the clock and the puddles. The ticking grew louder, closer, and then stopped altogether. The silence was so heavy, so absolute, it pressed against his eardrums. He stepped closer to the clock, his boots splashing in the shallow water. As his light swept the wooden surface, he realized the carvings weren't decorative at all. They were scratches. Deep grooves dug by fingernails, words, hundreds of them, overlapping. Some he could barely make out. Others burned into the wood as though seared with heat. It never ends. He makes us wait. Don't fall asleep. Time is the trap. Ethan's breath caught. He reached out a trembling hand toward the glass face of the clock. His fingertip hovered just above it when, bang, the pendulum slammed forward, swinging violently as though kicked. The glass face cracked, spiderwebbing across the surface. Both clock hands jerked downward, spinning too fast, blurring into a circle. The chamber shook, and then the voices began again. Not whispers, not murmurs. Screams, hundreds of them, all at once, flooding the air like a hurricane of agony. Men, women, children, each one layered atop the other until Ethan dropped to his knees, hands clamped against his skull. The puddles around him rippled harder, then bubbled as though boiling. From the dark water, pale shapes began to rise. Hands thin, bony, clawing their way upward. Faces surface, mouths stretched in eternal screams. Their eyes were gone, hollow sockets filled with black liquid. Ethan scrambled backward as they dragged themselves free, half-formed bodies of water and rot, reaching for him with skeletal fingers. The clock chimed, once. The sound shattered through him like a blade. His vision blurred. His ears rang, twice. The waterborne figure staggered closer, Each chime made them stronger, more solid. Flesh knitting over their bones, hair sprouting in clumps, features reforming in grotesque, twisted shapes. Thrice, Ethan stumbled to his feet, desperate for an exit. His flashlight beam darted around the chamber there. A door on the far side, small, half hidden behind a collapsed beam. He bolted, splashing through the puddles as icy hands scraped at his legs. One caught his boot, yanking him down into the water. His chin cracked against stone. Stars burst in his vision. He kicked violently, boot connecting with bone, and the grip released. The upstairs corridor still hummed with the memory of voices when Ethan turned away from the last open door. His breath quivered in the silence, his pulse thrumming through his ears like drums. For one disorienting second, he thought he could still hear her, the calm, gentle voice that had called his name, but the house had swallowed it, leaving only the sound of his own shallow breaths. He knew one thing with certainty: the house was leading him. First through the hallway of echoes, then into the upstairs maze of whispering doors. And now, as he moved back down the winding staircase, he could feel it tugging him deeper further inside. The ground floor had changed. The walls were darker, stained with damp streaks that hadn't been there before. The air pressed heavier against his skin, thick with the scent of soil and mold. He swept his flashlight in shaky arcs, and it caught something at the far end of the hall, a door, bolted shut with a rusted iron latch. Unlike the others, this one didn't rattle. It didn't whisper, it waited. Ethan's heart sank. He knew before he even touched it where it led. The basement. He hesitated at the top of the stairwell after prying open the latch. The door yawned downward into nothingness, his flashlight beam absorbed by the black like it had hit smoke instead of space. A cold draft curled up the stairs, carrying the scent of earth, wet stone, and something acrid, chemical. He whispered to himself as if words could steady his legs. It's just a house. Just bricks, wood, and air. But when he took the first step down, the house answered. A whisper, so faint he might have mistaken it for wind, curling upward from the depths. Not his name this time. Just words too low to decipher, layered atop one another, like a dozen voices murmuring beneath the floor. He descended slowly. Each step groaned under his weight, the wood brittle and uneven. His flashlight flickered, then steadied. The beam carved out stone walls, slick with condensation, and cobwebs that hung in heavy sheets like curtains. The whispers clearer with each step. His ears strained to separate them, but the voices overlapped, men, women, children all speaking at once in a chorus of secrets. A phrase rose above the others, repeated over and over. Don't look at them. Don't look at them. Don't look at them. Ethan's throat tightened. He clutched the railing, forcing himself lower until his shoes touched the dirt-packed floor. The basement stretched wide, far larger than the footprint of the house above. The flashlight revealed row after row of wooden support beams, cracked and rotting. Jars sat on old shelves, glass jars cloudy with age, filled with dark, unidentifiable substances floating in liquid. Some held scraps of fabric, others bones no larger than a child's finger. He gagged, turning the beam away. And then he saw them, figures. At first, he thought they were mannequins, draped in tattered cloth, standing motionless along the far wall. But the longer he stared, the more wrong they seemed. Their bodies weren't smooth, but warped shoulders too sharp, arms too long, heads tilted unnaturally far to one side. Their faces were pale and eyeless, blank skin stretched where features should have been. The whispers surged louder, hissing through the basement like a storm of breath. Ethan clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound pressed through his skull. Don't look at them. He swung the flashlight away, heart hammering, but curiosity clawed at him. He turned back, and one of the figures was closer. He stumbled back, the beam shaking wildly. Another figure shifted forward, its head twitching in tiny jerking movements. Their faceless skin seemed to ripple, as if something beneath it writhed. "Stay back," Ethan shouted, his own voice ragged. The figures didn't stop. They didn't walk, not in any way he could understand. One moment they were across the room, the next they were nearer, closing the distance between heartbeats, appearing where they hadn't been. Every time his eyes blinked, they moved. The whispers crescendoed into a roar, filling every corner of his skull. He backed against a shelf, glass jars rattling violently behind him. One toppled and shattered at his feet, releasing a reek of spoiled blood. Something inside twitched before going still. The nearest figure was only feet away now. He could see the fabric of its closed children's pajamas, yellowed with age. A single hand rose, impossibly thin, reaching toward him. The faceless head tilted as if listening, and then it whispered. Not in the chorus of voices, not in the noise flooding his mind. This one was close, personal, directly in his ear. "Ethan." The sound was so intimate, so clear. He could feel the breath against his skin, his body seized with primal terror. He bolted. His flashlight beam swung wildly as he sprinted across the dirt floor, the whispers chasing him, echoing louder, bending into laughter and shrieks. The staircase loomed ahead, but as he lunged for it, the wood warped. The steps stretched upward, impossibly tall, receding into the darkness. No matter how fast he ran, the stairs grew further away. Behind him, the whispers began to chant his name. "Ethan, Ethan, Ethan," he screamed, throwing himself forward, and the beam of his flashlight caught something new, a door. Not the one he came through, but another, low and narrow, half buried in the earth at the far wall. Its frame sagged, but it stood wide open. The whispers stopped instantly. The silence was worse. Ethan's lungs burned, his body trembling as he staggered toward the door. The air that seeped from it was colder still, reeking of stagnant water and rot. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to find any other way. But as he glanced behind him, the faceless figures stood in perfect rows, unmoving now, blocking every path back. The choice was made for him. He ducked through the small doorway and descended a short flight of stone steps. The basement had a basement. The whispers did not follow him here. Instead, a single voice greeted him, soft, broken. It came from the shadows ahead, quivering like a candle flame about to die. "Please," it said, a child's voice. "Don't let them put me back in the walls." 4. The clock chimed again, deeper, louder. The chamber seemed to shrink with the sound, walls bowing inward as though the house itself were breathing. The figures screamed in unison, their voices melding with the clock's toll. Ethan threw himself at the blocked door, shoving the beam aside. It shifted with a groan of splintering wood. Behind him, the water surged higher, spilling over his ankles, then his knees. The figures were nearly whole now, dozens of them, their mouths opening in a single, endless wail. 5. The chime rattled his bones. He clawed at the door, shoved, and it gave way. He stumbled into another passage just as the water erupted behind him, flooding the chamber with a roar. The door slammed shut on its own, silence. Ethan collapsed against the wall, chest heaving, soaked and trembling. His flashlight flickered weakly, casting long, broken shadows down the narrow hall, and then the ticking returned. Not behind him, ahead. His light caught it. Another clock, smaller this time, set into the stone wall like it had grown there. Its face cracked, hands locked at 12, and beyond it, another. And another. The corridor stretched into infinity, lined with clocks of every shape and size. Grandfather clocks, pocket watches, wall clocks, all frozen at 12, their pendulums still, but all of them ticking in perfect rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Ethan staggered forward, surrounded by the impossible sound. His own watch on his wrist had stopped, its second hand frozen in place. Time itself was no longer moving. And then among the clocks, he saw something else. A figure. Not faceless, like the basement horrors. This one had a face, but it was his own. Ethan froze, breath caught in his throat. The figure was him, identical in every detail, but pale, gaunt, and smiling with lips too wide, teeth too sharp. His double raised a finger to his lips. Shh. The clocks all stopped ticking at once. The silence was unbearable. And then the final chime. 12. The hallway shook. The walls split, clocks shattering, tears and glass exploding outward in a storm of metal. Ethan threw himself down, arms over his head as shards tore through the air. When the sound died, he looked up. The hallway was gone. He was standing in a vast, dark space. The floor was stone, but endless. Above him, no ceiling, only black. And in the distance, a single massive clock tower rose into the void. Its face was cracked, its hands pointed at 12. And the pendulum began to swing. With each arc, the air grew colder. Shadows writhed along the floor, twisting into figures that crawled closer. Ethan staggered back, but the tower loomed, impossibly far yet unbearably near. A voice thundered from the dark, shaking the ground beneath him. You entered his house. The pendulum swung again. You entered his time. Another swing. Now you cannot leave. The shadow figures surged forward, dozens of them, their whispers erupting into screams. Ethan turned to run, but the darkness thickened like tar, clutching at his legs. The pendulum's swing slowed, slower, slower, until it stopped. The silence that followed was eternal. And then, for the first time since entering the house, Ethan realized what was wrong. He hadn't taken a single breath. Not since the clock began to tick. Ethan stood frozen in the void. The blackness stretched forever in all directions, broken only by the massive clock tower that rose above him, its cracked face looming like a pale moon. The pendulum had stopped, and the silence that followed gnawed at his mind. His chest burned, his lungs begged for air, yet no breath came. And then he heard it. A sound unlike any other he had heard since entering the Ashpine house. Not a whisper, not a scream, but a low, endless moaning, a chorus of voices stretched into one eternal note. It was coming from the tower, and from behind the tower, he saw it. A door, tall, jagged, crooked. Its surface looked alive, like skin stretched too tight, veins pulsing faintly beneath it. Hands protruded from the wood, dozens of them, clawing outward but trapped just beneath the surface. Mouths pressed against it from inside, screaming silently, their faces contorting in agony. Ethan's heart lurched. He knew this was it. The final barrier. The place where all those voices, all those trapped souls had been cast. The door of forgotten screams. The pull of the door. The ground trembled under his boots. He tried to step back, but the darkness beneath him clung tighter, pulling him forward as though dragging him toward the door. His flashlight sputtered, then went out completely, but he didn't need it anymore. The door glowed faintly with a sickly yellow light seeping from the cracks that lined its frame. Ethan? The voice was behind him, soft, familiar. He turned. It was his mother, or at least the shape of her. Pale, flickering, her face caught between beauty and rot. She reached for him with trembling hands. Don't open it, please, don't open it. His chest tightened. His real mother had died years ago. Cancer. He remembered the hospital bed, the machines, her hand in his. This wasn't her. He shook his head violently. You're not real. Her expression twisted, lips peeling back into a too-wide grin. Her eyes darkened, hollow. Her voice deepened until it wasn't hers at all. Open it. The figure collapsed into dust. Ethan stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The void itself seemed to be funneling him toward the tower, toward the door. The moaning grew louder, rising into shrieks, then into something worse, laughter. The tower awakens, the clock tower groaned, gears grinding somewhere deep within its impossible structure. Its cracked face flickered with light, shadows writhing beneath the glass as though something were pressed against it, trying to get out. The pendulum swung again, once, and the door shuddered. Hands burst through its surface, bones breaking through the skin like wood. They clawed outward, fingers stretching and snapping as they reached for freedom. The moans became screams, hundreds of them, all different, all desperate. Twice, the cracks widened. Mouths forced themselves open across the door, rows of teeth gnashing, tongues writhing as if tasting the air. Thrice, the door's handle appeared, twisting on its own. A scream louder than all the rest erupted from within, so powerful Ethan dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. Blood trickled down the sides of his face from the sheer force of it. The pendulum swung slower now, as if savoring each moment. Ethan's choice, he crawled toward the base of the tower, his body moving against his will. The closer he came, the stronger the pull. The door wanted him, needed him. And then, among the endless screams, he heard one voice rise above the rest. The child. "Don't let them put me back in the walls." Ethan froze. That voice again, so clear, but now he understood. The child wasn't warning him of the house. The child was begging him not to let the door take him. He forced himself to his feet, staggering under the crushing weight of the air. The handle of the door twisted fully, ready to open. If it did, whatever was behind it would pour into the world. The screams would no longer be trapped. He had two choices. Open it himself and release everything. Seal it shut and join those trapped behind it forever. The clock struck once more. The door opens, Ethan screamed, lunging forward. He gripped the handle with both hands, trying to force it back, to seal it. But the door pulsed under his grip like a beating heart, hot and wet, and the force behind it was too strong. The voices shrieked, urging him to let go. "Join us! Free us! Open it!" The door slammed against him, throwing him backward. The skin surface split down the center, light blazing outward so bright it seared his eyes. From the crack, black smoke poured, filled with shapes that writhed and screamed. He scrambled to his feet as the gap widened. Faces spilled through the smoke, familiar, unfamiliar, human, monstrous. Their screams cut into him like knives, every sound a memory of death. And then the child appeared. A boy no older than 7, standing in the doorway. His eyes were hollow, his skin gray, his mouth sewn shut with black thread. He reached a trembling hand toward Ethan. The thread snapped. "Help me." The collapsed Ethan reached out without thinking. The boy's hand was ice, colder than death. As their palms touched, the door roared like a living beast. The tower shook violently, gears snapping, glass shattering. The pendulum froze in mid-swing, and the screaming stopped. Total silence. Ethan blinked. The void was gone. He was back in the house on Ashpine Road. The same hallway where it had all begun. The same peeling wallpaper, the same dust in the air. But it was not empty. The walls moved. Hands pressed through the plaster, dozens of them, clawing, grasping. Faces bulged from the walls, mouths open in silent screams. The child's voice whispered again, so close it was as if he stood beside him. "Don't let them put me back in the walls." Ethan spun, searching for him, but there was no child, only the door. The same crooked, veined door now standing in the hallway of the house. It was closed, but not locked. The handle trembled, as though something inside was already pushing again. And then, from the other side, a single knock. Bang. The sound shook the house. Dust rained from the ceiling. Bang. Louder this time. Ethan stumbled backward, heart hammering. He knew it wasn't over. The door had followed him back. Bang. And then the voice, deep, guttural, final. "We are not forgotten." The handle twisted. The door began to open. Ethan staggered back from the trembling door, its handle twitching like the pulse of something alive. The knocks echoed through the house like cannon fire, each one louder, closer, more desperate. Bang, bang, bang. The walls around him screamed. Hands burst through the wallpaper, fingers clawing at the air, scratching at his skin as if trying to drag him inside. The faces bulged again, their mouths gaping in eternal agony. And then silence. The house stilled. Dust floated gently in the air. For one fragile moment, Ethan thought it was over. But then he heard it. Not the child's whisper, not the screams. Something deeper, older. A voice that seemed to come from beneath the house itself. You opened it. The floorboards beneath his feet split open, the wood snapping like bones. Darkness swallowed the cracks, spreading fast. He stumbled backward, but found no ground. The house fell away, peeling like burned paper, until only the door remained suspended in endless black. The door creaked open, just enough for him to glimpse what lay beyond. Not fire, not shadow, but an endless corridor lined with doors, thousands of them, stretching forever, each one whispering, each one waiting. Behind every door, more screams, more trapped souls. And in the middle of that corridor, the asylum, tall, endless, broken. Its windows lit with a sickly yellow glow. Iron gates stretched high, carved with words that chilled his blood. Blackwood Hill Asylum. Ethan's heart stopped. He realized the house on Ashpine Road wasn't the prison. It was just the keyhole. The true prison, the silent asylum, was waiting for him. The child appeared again, standing by the asylum gates, his sewn mouth stitched shut once more. He raised one trembling finger and pointed at Ethan. The doors along the corridor began to open, one by one. Screams poured out. Hands reached. And Ethan was pulled inside. The door slammed shut,